Hey, everyone, and welcome back to the Claims Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Gross. And today we are going to dive into a side of revenue cycle that's often talked about, but rarely understood from a network building and contracting perspective. Joining me today is Lisa Rock, President of Unity Preferred Network, a leader in connecting providers through contracted networks that emphasize fair pricing, direction of care, and real solutions for rural and de novo centers. Her work lives at the intersection of strategy with a deep understanding of the business side of healthcare, and she also brings a fresh perspective on out-of-network solutions. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Lindsay.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We really appreciate having you on.
My
Uh,
pleasure.
could, could you give our listeners a quick background on your experience in healthcare?
Sure. I have been on the business side of medicine for about 40 years. I've been fortunate enough to see it from a lot of different lenses: the clinic side, the payer side, third party billing side, management company side, even patient side. And it's given me a lot of really good perspective on the entire claims adjudication process. I'm thrilled to be a part of a company that's helping bridge some very clear gaps in the provider network environment.
To that point, Lisa, for those that maybe aren't familiar with Unity Preferred Network, can you start by sharing a bit about what your company does and what sets you apart in the healthcare space?
Right. So I think let me back it up just a little bit. We have your normal payers. We're going to refer to those as BUCA, Blue Shield, United, Cigna, Aetna. Everyone should be pretty familiar with those guys. They have kind of a blended model of fully insured products and also ASO models, or administrative services only, for self-funded plans. So Unity Preferred would be on the one side only. We're not fully insured. We are the network only for self-funded plans, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And then for areas of the country where BUCA has not developed a network, we're there. For those providers that are negotiating contracts, like a de novo center, we're there to help bridge that gap. Anytime there isn't a strong network available, that's where we come in, and we can help providers and patients, and also the self-funded payers, with a good process that's fair for everyone.
Got it. So maybe just getting a little bit, more into the underserved markets that you were just referring to, de novo centers, rural providers. You've made them a focus at Unity. What unique challenges do those providers face when it comes to reimbursement and cash flow?
Well, let's start with what the patients face as a challenge. If you, as a member of a particular health plan or employer group, if you have to see a specialist and there isn't one near you that's in the network, or your favorite provider for whatever reason isn't in the network, you may have to travel for a test or
Yes.
see a particular physician. And in some cases, it's traveling pretty far. Unity can come in and do direct contracts with those out of network providers to help access. And access in healthcare is critical for good outcomes and happy members. That's one example of how we help the member, which helps the entire system function properly.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Access issues, lack of leverage for those providers in those areas. And so, kind of related to that point, you also mentioned Unity focuses on fair pricing and direction of care, two things that directly impact revenue cycle downstream. Can you walk us through how that kind of network structure improves not just patient outcomes, but also reimbursement timelines and cost predictability for providers?
For the most part, right now, if you as a provider are out of network because you're a de novo center, a lot of times you're out of network with all of the major payers because you're in the process of negotiating contracts, or you just don't see enough of that particular health plan to have a contract in place. When you, as a provider, provide a service and submit that claim, you really have no idea what you're going to be paid, because there are so many factors at play. And most of them aren't going to be favorable to you or the member. they're usually going to have significantly high out-of-pocket costs. And the provider can get stuck with a very low reimbursement. And then there's the appeals process, and that's lengthy. And then there are rules around those appeals, getting the member involved. And it's actually quite expensive to go down that road. When I say you don't know what you're going to get paid, you really don't. One reimbursement methodology that payers use is usual and customary.
Yeah.
And anyone that's been on the billing side for a long time knows that there is a different definition pretty much every time you talk to the payers, what they're using in terms of calculating usual and customary. So that's difficult to sort of predict what your net revenue is. Unity can come in, get a good rate for you, contracted, so you as the provider, you know what you're going to get paid. The patient's out of pocket is capped, and the payer knows exactly what they have to pay. So it's good because it bridges all those gaps. And once the payment is made timely, then that's less expensive for everyone.
It sounds like a no-brainer. I think so. From a revenue cycle lens, it feels like these providers often operate on razor-thin margins. What can networks like yours do to strengthen their position, both with payers and patients, which you kind of talked about a little bit already, but what do you think about that?
I think the predictability of net revenue is important. That's going to strengthen a provider's position. If I know my net revenue is $100,000 a month, that's going to help me with planning and running my business. Even if there's 10% where I don't know, that's pretty significant. Closing up that gap, although it seems small, I think is important.
These underserved markets are largely hurting for their cash flow. So any way that can help them maintain, or to your point, predict, what they can expect in terms of reimbursement and forecasting, makes all of the difference in the world to those smaller practices and underserved markets.
Yeah, and if we can get a contract in place in those areas, the members are happy, the employers are happy, and it is a win-win. Win-win-win.
Yeah. And, you mentioned out of network, and to your point, those of us that have been in the space a long time, we often associate out of network as a dirty word. We think of denials and patient frustration and payment delays and just battles. But Unity approaches it as a strategic solution. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
It's really funny. I've given so many lectures over the years on out of network and how it's going away, and it still isn't gone.
That's
And
right.
it isn't gone for a reason. If you are being offered a rate by one of the major carriers and it's low, there is a good chance you'll be out of network with that payer. If you're a new center or a new practice, you're possibly out of network in some instances. Or if you're adding a new specialty to your organization and you're renegotiating the contract. There are lots of different reasons that you may be out of network, or if you're in a rural environment. The other
Right.
thing too is you might be in an area where the payer doesn't have to let you in the network, and you're stuck. So I know there are some states that have an any willing provider law, and as long as the provider meets the criteria to join the network, they can get in, or they have to be let in, but not all states have that. And so you do have many, many situations where providers want to get in network and they can't. And again, Unity can help here.
What I'm hearing you say is, if when done right, out of network isn't about going rogue. It's about having a plan. And from your perspective, how can RCM leaders better manage these situations before they spiral?
I think recognizing the downsides of out of network without a plan. I've seen a lot of, we're getting 100% of billed charges. Okay, maybe on one or two procedures or cases, but overall, what are your numbers out of network? How long is it taking you to get paid? And what are you really getting paid? And what are you billing the patient? Do you have compliance issues there? I mean, there are a lot of questions here and a lot of reasons why you should tighten that piece up.
Right. And I think too, sometimes providers aren't even aware of payers that they're out of network with. They might even think they're in network. Sometimes those EOBs, when they come in, they can be very confusing.
It's interesting, and that's a different subject, but have you heard of specialty networks? Of
Yes.
course you have. So when you read your managed care agreement, there is very likely some language that refers to a specialty network, which means your carrier has subcontracted with another network company to provide a different fee schedule for a particular group of people. And I typically see this with unions, for example. Let's say and this is just hypothetical, there's a teachers union, the rates are lower, but it's one of the big, payers. And so they'll put this group of teachers in a specialty network. And even though you as a provider have a contract with that carrier, you may be excluded from this specialty network.
Right.
And the way you find out is when you do your insurance verification, they'll say, oh, this patient doesn't have any benefits. Well, they do, just not for you. And so that's a different can of worms. But I think if there are out of network benefits, then that's great. But why not get a contract in place to help in those situations
Yeah.
as they come up?
Absolutely. It just seems like, as you already pointed out, from the patient's perspective, from the provider's perspective, from the payer's perspective, it just streamlines the entire approach. So, Lisa, you've talked about direction of care, helping ensure patients land in the right setting at the right time. How does that align with the goals of RCM?
Okay, let's talk about this. I'm going to sidetrack just a little bit. One of the things that we look at in revenue management is the cancellation rate. Because if your cancellation rate is high, you're losing revenue, right?
Absolutely.
If these patients aren't rescheduling, you're losing revenue. And
Yes.
by the way, a delay is a loss, right? If you're losing, if you know why your patients are canceling, let's say they're canceling because you're out of network.
Yes.
This could easily it could help in those cases. So that would strengthen up your missed revenue, which you don't even see. So that's one. And then, of course, the whole process of getting paid and knowing what you're going to get paid and timely, that strengthens your rev cycle. So I think if you start from the very beginning and have a plan and lay it out, and then you measure and you manage, then you are doing the very best that you can.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. It again speaks to, managing cost containment, throughput, quality, and again just streamlining operations overall. So when aligning clinical appropriateness and financial health, which is always still evolving, how do you see networks like Unity continuing to shape that direction over the next few years?
That's a really good question. I think when you don't have to worry about the reimbursement, and you can actually focus on the clinical side. I mean, that's an old saying, right? From the beginning of time, we've heard that. I look at it a little bit differently. I think that providers should be concerned about revenue. They should know what's going on. They should peel the layers back and understand it. And they should be looking at these gaps and plugging them up. And then that gives them peace of mind that their patients are going to keep their appointments, that their services are going to be paid for, and the patient's out of pocket is under control. And again, I think that side of the business can contribute, if buttoned up, can contribute in a very positive way to outcomes.
I agree. And again, not only getting paid, as you just mentioned, but being paid timely for those services that can otherwise be extremely lengthy if you're able to secure the payment at all. So it makes a lot of sense. Before we wrap up, what advice would you give to RCM leaders, practice managers, or even new facility operators who are looking to improve their reimbursement strategy through a smart network partnership?
Well, working on the payer side for so long, I have a lot of answers for that, but I'm going to focus on how I can help. And I can help by providing a contract that will button up some of those gaps that we talked about in this podcast. The out of network, the renegotiation, the rural communities, button those things up. I can help and negotiate a good, fair rate for yourselves. I'll be as fair as I possibly can. I think that don't overlook that because it's a small part of the business. I would say button that up and help help guide to an accurate net revenue for all of your business.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Lisa. Lisa, thank you so much. This has been a masterclass in network strategy. And I know our listeners will walk away with some actionable insight. To our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode in whatever way you choose to digest your podcasts, don't forget to subscribe, share it with a colleague, and be sure to check out Unity Preferred Network to learn more about their innovative approach to smarter, faster care. Lisa, if folks are interested in reaching you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
So I don't sleep. So you can you can reach me 24/7 at lisa.rock@unitynetwork.health.
Awesome. Lisa is also on LinkedIn. All right. Well, thank you, Lisa. And to our listeners, again, we'll be back next month with our Claims Theory podcast. Until then, stay curious and stay strategic. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.